6 a.m. cops bang on my door because the HOA president's son reported a drowning in my pool. But when they arrived, he was the one trying to smash my gate open. Then the officer asked one question: "Son, do you live here?" His answer made the cop's jaw drop. That $200 smart lock didn't just protect my property, it exposed a $600,000 criminal empire. And I've got the footage to prove it. But to understand how a $200 lock destroyed a criminal empire, rewind to when I first found paradise. I traded 5 years of 3 a.m. coding sessions for this dream home. After living on nothing but energy drinks and takeout, debugging until my eyes bled, I finally had my peace. The startup sale to Google had gone through, and with that money burning a hole in my pocket, I bought what I thought would be paradise, a 2 acre property in Oak Creek Estates with a 40-foot infinity pool overlooking the Pine Hills. But my infinity pool wasn't just mine. I found a used condom floating in it. Empty white claws. Vomit behind my planters. Someone had turned my sanctuary into a nightclub, and the ringleader was closer than I thought. The first 2 weeks were everything I dreamed of. Birds chirping instead of Slack notifications, actual sleep instead of debugging sessions, and most importantly, absolute silence. I'd swim my laps at sunrise, work on my new projects without interruption, and fall asleep to the sound of wind through the trees. It was perfect. Too perfect, as it turned out. The first sign something was wrong came on a Monday morning. I walked out to the pool area with my coffee and immediately noticed the lounge chairs had been moved. Not drastically, but enough that my type A personality picked up on it. There were wet spots around the pool deck that hadn't been there the night before, which was odd since it hadn't rained. I told myself I was being paranoid. Maybe the wind had shifted the chairs. Maybe morning dew explained the moisture. But then I walked over to empty the skimmer basket and my stomach turned. Floating there among the leaves was a used condom. My hands actually shook as I fished it out with the net. Someone had been in my pool. Someone had been doing activities in my pool. I spent the rest of that morning searching the property for more evidence. The trash can by the pool house revealed 6 empty White Claw cans, which was particularly disturbing since I don't drink alcohol. There were cigarette butts ground into my pristine patio, and worst of all, I found what looked like dried vomit behind one of the planters. My retirement paradise had been turned into someone's party venue, and I had no idea who or when or how. The main gate had been locked. I was obsessive about that. The side gates were all secure. Yet somehow people had been here. Multiple people, from the looks of it. And they treated my private property like their personal playground. That afternoon, I remembered the old security camera on the main gate. It was a cheap thing the previous owner had installed, grainy and unreliable, but it might have caught something. I pulled up the footage from the weekend, fast forwarding through hours of nothing until Saturday night around 11 p.m. What I saw made my blood boil. First one car, then another pulling up to my gate. Teenagers and young adults piling out, at least 20 or 30 of them. And there at the gate, like some kind of bouncer at a nightclub, was a young man I'd later learn was Chad. He was collecting something from each person, cash, from what I could tell before letting them through my gate with what must have been a copied key or code. The party footage was even worse than I had imagined. They weren't just swimming, they were drinking heavily, blasting music, and several couples were getting very intimate on my pool deck. I watched in horror as one kid threw up in my pool, as another threw beer cans into my garden, as they turned my private sanctuary into their personal nightclub. But the worst part was watching Chad at the end of the night, counting a thick stack of bills and pocketing them with a satisfied grin. This wasn't just trespassing. This was a business. Someone was literally selling access to my pool at what looked like $50 a head. A quick count of the attendees suggested he'd made over $1,000 in one night from my property. The next morning, I drove to the hardware store and bought the best smart lock I could find, an August Smart Lock Pro with HD camera integration. I spent the afternoon installing it, making sure the camera had a clear view of anyone approaching, and added a large private property, no trespassing sign for good measure. The lock could only be opened with my phone and would send me instant alerts if anyone tried to tamper with it. I thought that would be the end of it. I thought wrong. Exactly 2 hours after I finished the installation, there was a pounding on my front door that sounded like someone trying to knock it down. I opened the door to find a woman in her mid-50s wearing what I can only describe as the official Karen uniform, bleached blonde bob, oversized sunglasses despite being on my covered porch, and a face twisted in rage. "What is this monstrosity on your gate?" she screeched without so much as a hello. I tried to introduce myself, explained that I was the new owner, but she cut me off with a perfectly manicured finger pointed at my face. "I am Barbara Whitman, president of the Oak Creek Estates Homeowners Association, and that electronic eyesore violates Section 7.3.2 of our community standards regarding aesthetic uniformity." She thrust a paper at me that was apparently an official HOA violation notice. "You have 48 hours to remove that lock or face $500 daily fines. This neighborhood has standards. We're not some tech wasteland where people can just install whatever gadgets they please." Her voice had reached a pitch that I'm pretty sure only dogs should be able to hear. I tried to explain about the trespassing, about finding evidence of parties on my property, but she wasn't interested. If you have security concerns, you submit a request to the HOA board for approval. You don't just make unilateral decisions that affect our property values. As she stormed off, my elderly neighbor Arthur appeared from next door, carrying what looked like banana bread. "Welcome to Barb's Kingdom," he said with a wry smile. He looked at the violation notice in my hand and shook his head. "Section 7.3.2, that's her favorite. She made that rule up last year when the Johnsons tried to install a video doorbell." He paused, then added something that made my blood run cold. "You know, before she lost everything in the Dragon Plaza development disaster, she used to be reasonable. But now that HOA presidency is all she has left, she guards it like a dictator guards their throne." Arthur sat with me on my porch, and over the next hour, he painted a picture of Barbara that explained everything. She and her husband had been major real estate developers, riding high until their biggest project, Dragon Plaza, turned into a massive failure. Lawsuits, bankruptcy, divorce. She lost it all. The only thing she managed to keep was her house in Oak Creek and her position as HOA president. And her son Chad, Arthur added. Well, he was in college until he got caught borrowing a professor's laptop. Now he just lives with mommy and acts like he owns the neighborhood. Speaking of which, he looked at me seriously. "She needs your pool desperately." I must have looked confused because Arthur continued. "Think about it. Big house, no income, a lifestyle she can't afford anymore. But your beautiful private pool that the previous owner never used, that's been Chad's personal ATM for years. Those parties you found evidence of? They've been happening every weekend. $50 a head, sometimes more for special events." My jaw dropped. This wasn't just about some kids sneaking in for a swim. This was organized crime, basically. But how did they get access? Arthur shrugged. Previous owner was never here. Property management company had keys. Chad's girlfriend worked there until recently. You do the math. Arthur pointed at Barbara's mansion. She lost everything in bankruptcy, except this HOA presidency. Your pool? It's her illegal cash machine. $50 a head. Parties every weekend. And that lock just cut off her lifeline. My stomach dropped. The HOA president wasn't just enabling crimes. She was the CEO. The next few days were quiet. Too quiet. I kept expecting another confrontation, but Barbara seemed to be lying low. Chad hadn't tried to access the pool again, probably because the smart lock had him stumped. I started to relax, thinking maybe the lock had solved the problem. I should have known better. These people had built a business on my property. They weren't going to give up because of one smart lock. What happened next would make national news and change all our lives forever. It started at 6:15 on a Thursday morning. I was in my kitchen making coffee when I heard shouting from the direction of the pool gate. I grabbed my phone and pulled up the camera feed. There was Chad with 3 friends, all carrying pool bags and coolers. He was yanking on the gate, kicking it, screaming profanities. What the hell? Mom said this would be fixed. One of his friends, a girl in a bikini despite the cool morning air, whined, Dude, I already promised Ashley we'd have the sunrise session. She's bringing her photographer. Chad was getting more agitated by the second. This stupid lock. I bet that nerd installed it just to mess with us. Then I watched him do something that would seal his fate. He looked directly at my camera, pulled out his phone, and dialed 3 numbers. I could clearly see him pressing 911. Chad stared into my camera, smirking as he dialed. Help! A man's drowning in my neighbor's pool. His voice cracked with fake panic. He's not coming up. Then, to his friend, Cops will force that nerd to open up. Mom will handle the rest. But I had his performance on 4K video. Hello, help. There's a man drowning in my neighbor's pool. Chad's voice had transformed from angry bro to panic citizen in an instant. I can see him sinking. Oh God, he's not moving. He went under and hasn't come up. He was putting on quite a performance, even adding hand gestures for the camera as if the 911 operator could see him. The gate has some kind of electronic lock. I can't get in to save him. Please hurry. The address is 1847 Oak Creek Drive. Please, he's going to die. He hung up and high-fived his friend. That'll teach him to lock us out. Cops will make him open it, we'll get in, and Mom will handle the rest. 8 minutes later, 2 police cars screamed into my driveway. I met them at the front door, still in my pajamas and holding my coffee. Sir, we have reports of an active drowning in your pool. We need access immediately. The officers had bolt cutters and were clearly ready to take action. I stayed calm despite my racing heart. Officers, I'll gladly open the gate, but first you need to see something. There's no one drowning in my pool. In fact, there's no one in my pool at all. But I can show you who made that call and why. The officers looked skeptical, but followed me to my living room where I had my laptop set up. I pulled up the security footage on my 65-inch TV, making sure they could see everything clearly. This is my pool at 6:13 a.m., I said, showing the crystal clear empty pool without a single ripple. Here's 6:14. Young man appears, tries the gate, gets frustrated. The footage showed Chad yanking on the gate, kicking it. And here's 6:15, where he looks directly at my camera and makes a phone call. We watched Chad's Oscar-worthy performance, his fake panic, his detailed lies about a drowning man. And here's the pool from 6:16 through 6:24 when you arrived. Still empty. Still undisturbed. The senior officer's face had gone from skeptical to angry. He turned to look out the window where Chad was still standing by the gate, apparently expecting the police to force me to let him in. Filing a false report is a criminal offense, the officer said grimly, especially one that diverts emergency resources. We had to pull units from other calls for this. He and his partner walked outside, and I followed with my laptop. Chad's cocky expression faltered when he saw the officers' faces. Did you make him open it? The drowning man. The senior officer cut him off. Sir, we need to have a word with you about filing false police reports. Chad's performance skills kicked in again. What? No. I saw someone drowning. I swear. The app must have glitched or something. The officer wasn't buying it. The app didn't glitch while you were staring directly at the camera making the call. We just watched the footage. I helpfully turned my laptop around to show Chad the video of himself. His face went white. I thought I saw, maybe it was a shadow. His friends had backed away, suddenly very interested in their phones. Filing a false 911 report is a misdemeanor that can result in jail time and substantial fines. You diverted emergency resources that could have been saving actual lives. Just then, a Mercedes SUV screeched into my driveway and Barbara burst out like an avenging angel. What are you doing to my son? She inserted herself between Chad and the officers. He was just trying to help. He thought he saw someone drowning and tried to save a life. This is what good citizens do. The officer calmly pulled out his tablet and showed her the footage. I watched Barbara's face transform as she saw her son's performance. The righteous anger melted into shock, then panic. I. He must have been mistaken. The stress of his semester. He's been under so much pressure. The officer spent the next 20 minutes taking statements and issuing Chad an official warning for false reporting. Barbara tried every manipulation tactic in the book: tears, threats about their jobs, promises that it would never happen again, but the evidence was too clear. As they prepared to leave, the senior officer turned to me. You might want to consider getting a restraining order. This seems like an ongoing situation. Barbara heard that, and her mask completely dropped. She grabbed Chad's arm and turned to me with pure venom in her eyes. You'll regret this. I know how to make people like you leave this neighborhood. This neighborhood was perfect before you came. Enjoy your pool while you can. But why would a millionaire HOA president need to steal money from my pool? If you've ever dealt with a crazy HOA, drop your city in the comments. I'm mapping out where the worst Karens live. Armed with footage, I expected a fight, but Chad's 9/11 stunt crossed a line. The war began at 7 a.m. the very next morning. I was doing my regular laps, enjoying the peace of my pool now that I knew it was secure, when I heard sirens. Not distant sirens, sirens pulling into my driveway. I climbed out of the pool to find two officers approaching, looking embarrassed. Sir, we have a noise complaint. It came out as a question because even they seemed to realize how ridiculous it was. Out swimming? I stood there dripping in my swimsuit as they explained that a neighbor had called in a noise disturbance at 7 in the morning about swimming laps in my own pool. The officers were clearly uncomfortable. Look, we have to respond to all calls. Just maybe swim quieter. We all turned to see Barbara watching from her window with a satisfied smirk. Day 2 of Barbara's revenge campaign took a more official turn. I woke up to find her literally on her hands and knees in my front yard with a ruler, measuring my grass. She was taking photos from multiple angles, documenting that my grass was 3.5 inches tall when the HOA limit was apparently 3 inches. By noon, the Oak Creek Estates community social media page was flooded with her posts. Some people think rules don't apply to them, accompanied by close-up photos of my slightly overgrown grass. We have standards in this neighborhood that everyone must follow. The post got 47 likes and 23 angry reactions within an hour, mostly from Barbara's flying monkeys, who seemed to automatically support anything she said. Day 3 escalated to character assassination. Barbara had apparently spent hours photographing my house from every angle, highlighting my security cameras. Her posts painted me as some kind of paranoid tech bro surveillance state enthusiast. Our children are being watched by his cameras, she wrote, conveniently ignoring that the cameras only covered my own property. He refuses to share neighborhood amenities while spying on our families. The comments started piling up. Creepy. Why does he need so many cameras? My kids don't feel safe anymore. Each comment was like a small dagger, turning neighbors I'd never even met against me. By day 4, the legal threats arrived. A thick envelope from the law firm of Brewster, Coleman, and Amp. Associates contained a demand for $50,000 in damages. The letter claimed I had caused severe emotional distress to Chad, defamed his character by implying criminal behavior, and created a hostile living environment for the Whitman family. My hands shook as I read through the legal jargon. $50,000 for stopping someone from criminally trespassing on my property? The letter went on to threaten further action if I didn't remove the smart lock and issue a public apology for harassing a young man who was only trying to help. That evening, I sat by my pool in the gathering darkness, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake. The paradise I'd bought was turning into a nightmare. Neighbors crossed the street to avoid me. Parents pulled their children closer when I walked by. The peace I'd sought was replaced by suffocating tension. Maybe I should just remove the lock, I thought. Maybe accessing a pool wasn't worth becoming the neighborhood pariah. But then I thought about the principle of it all. This was my property. I'd worked 60-hour weeks for 5 years to afford this. Why should I let some entitled brat and his Karen mother bully me into submission? I was pulled from my brooding by footsteps on my driveway. Arthur appeared carrying 2 cups of coffee, looking grim. Figured you could use this, he said, handing me a mug. We sat in silence for a moment before he spoke again. You know why I'm helping you, right? Why I'm willing to go against Barbara when everyone else is too scared. He pulled out his phone and showed me a photo of a pretty teenage girl. This is my granddaughter, Stephanie, 16 years old, straight A student. Last year, she went to one of those pool parties. Came home barely conscious. Hospital said her blood alcohol was 0.24. My stomach dropped as Arthur continued. Chad sold her vodka. $60 for a bottle worth 20. When she could barely stand, his friends thought it was funny to push her in the pool. She nearly drowned. Actually drowned, not the fake kind Chad claimed yesterday. His voice was steady, but I could see his hands trembling. I complained to Barbara. You know what she said. Kids will be kids. Maybe you should teach your granddaughter to handle her liquor better. That's when I knew she was not just enabling this, she was profiting from it. Arthur sat down his coffee and pulled up something on his phone. But here's what you don't know yet. Here's why Barbara needs your pool so desperately. He showed me a social media profile called Paradise Pool Exclusive. My jaw dropped. It had over 5,000 followers. The bio read Oak Creek's most exclusive pool experience, with a water emoji and DM for bookings. And every single photo, every single one was taken at my pool. My infinity edge with sunset lighting. My pool house decorated for parties. My diving board with teenagers doing flips. There were hundreds of posts going back 3 years. Check the tagged location on those photos, Arthur said quietly. I did. Every single photo was tagged with my address. My address. These people had been running a commercial enterprise out of my backyard for 3 years. I scrolled through in growing horror. There were themed parties, midnight splash Fridays, sunset vibes Saturdays, Sunday fun day photo shoots. And the comments were full of people raving about the sick venue and asking about booking their own events. One comment stood out, best $50 I ever spent. Way better than the public pool. The Paradise Pool exclusive Instagram had 5,000 followers, tagged at MY address. $200 VIP photo shoots. Holiday events at $150 a ticket. I scrolled through 3 years of proof, $600K in cash, all untaxed. But the worst post? A teen's hospital bracelet with the caption worth the hangover? That's when I noticed something odd about the Paradise Pool social media photos. They were all tagged at my exact address. If you've ever dealt with a crazy HOA, drop your city in the comments. I'm mapping out where the worst Karens live. But I wasn't done discovering the depth of this operation. Not by a long shot. Over the next 72 hours, I went into full investigation mode. I downloaded every single post from the Paradise Pool account, all 847 of them. I cross-referenced them with my security footage, creating a comprehensive timeline. This wasn't just kids sneaking into a pool. This was a fully organized business with regular hours, premium pricing, and special events. The pattern that emerged was staggering. Friday nights were midnight splash parties running from 11 p.m. to 3 a.m., $50 per person with 30 to 40 attendees each time. Saturdays featured sunset vibes from 6 p.m. to midnight at $75 for VIP access, which apparently meant they got to use my pool house and outdoor kitchen. Sundays were influencer hours where aspiring social media models paid $200 for 2-hour photo shoot slots. And Wednesdays, those were Barbara's private swimming lessons at $100 per hour, though from the footage I saw very little actual swimming instruction happening. I pulled out my calculator and did the math. Conservative estimates put the weekly revenue at $3,500 to $4,000. Over 3 years, that was between $546,000 and $624,000. Let's be conservative and call it $200,000 per year. $200,000 of revenue generated from my property without my knowledge or consent. And I was willing to bet not a single cent of it had been reported to the IRS. The more I dug, the more evidence I found. Video showed Barbara personally counting cash at the end of each night. Chad maintained what looked like inventory lists for alcohol sales, marked up 300% from retail. The numbers on the screen made me dizzy. Barbara wasn't just stealing, she was building an empire using my property. Premium pricing for holidays showed $100 entry fees for 4th of July parties. New Year's Eve commanded $150 per person. They even charged an extra $50 for access to my gazebo, which they marketed as a VIP cabana. One video from last month showed a particularly damning conversation. Barbara was lecturing Chad about profit margins. "This month I'm taking 80%, she said clearly. "You need to learn better management skills." Chad protested that he did all the work, but Barbara shut him down. "I handle the cops, the neighbors, the HOA. That's worth 80%. The mention of handling cops sent chills down my spine. This wasn't their first rodeo. They had systems in place, procedures for dealing with complaints. How many other neighbors had tried to speak up only to be silenced by Barbara's HOA powers? I found my answer in the community social media archives. 3 years ago, the previous owner of my house had posted about noise issues and unauthorized use of his property. The comments were brutal, led by Barbara claiming he was a bitter recluse who hated children having innocent fun. He deleted the posts and, according to property records, listed the house for sale 2 months later. But the smoking gun came from a video dated just 1 week ago, days after I'd moved in but before I'd installed the lock. Barbara and Chad were having what appeared to be a strategy meeting by the pool. "The new owner seems like a tech nerd," Chad said. "Think he'll be a problem?" Barbara's response was chilling. "They all fold eventually. A few HOA violations, some social pressure, maybe a legal threat or two. He'll either fall in line or move out like the others." She then looked directly at the camera Chad was using to record and added, "And if he doesn't, well, we have ways of making life very uncomfortable for uncooperative neighbors." I saved every piece of evidence onto multiple drives, screenshots, videos, financial estimates, all organized chronologically in folders. But I wasn't done. I needed to understand the full scope of this operation. A search of the state business database revealed BNC Entertainment LLC, B for Barbara, C for Chad, registered to Barbara's home address. The business claimed to be event planning, but had never filed a tax return. No business license, no insurance, no permits. Just pure profit funneled through a shell company that existed only on paper. The real shock came when I cross-referenced the Paradise Pool follower list with missing person reports and hospital records that had made the news. At least 3 teenagers who had attended these parties had ended up in the emergency room with alcohol poisoning. One girl had gone missing for 12 hours after a party, found passed out in the nearby woods. Another had crashed his car driving home drunk, thankfully only damaging property. These weren't just parties, they were dangerous, unregulated events that put kids at risk. And Barbara and Chad were profiting from every single one. I thought I had enough evidence. Then I found the video that would destroy them both. And it was recorded just last week. My hands trembled as I watched Barbara and Chad discussing their expansion plans. They weren't content with just my pool. They were eyeing the Johnsons' tennis court for exclusive court time and the Miller's boat dock for premium water experiences. Barbara laid out her vision. "Once I get reelected as HOA president next month, I can change the rules about property access. Emergency community use provisions. Then we can legally access any amenity we want." Chad grinned and asked about splitting profits. 70 to 30, Barbara said, and that's generous. I sat back in my chair, overwhelmed by what I discovered. This wasn't just about my pool. This was about a woman who turned the entire neighborhood into her personal business empire, using HOA rules as weapons and neighbors' properties as assets. The question now wasn't whether to fight back, it was how to expose this in a way that would stick. Barbara had been doing this for years. She had systems, connections, probably dirt on half the neighborhood. But I had something she didn't expect: video evidence of everything, technical skills to present it clearly, and most importantly, nothing left to lose. The neighborhood already hated me. What did I care if they hated me more? That night, I made my decision. I would take this to the monthly HOA meeting. Public forum, all residents present. No way for Barbara to spin or control the narrative. I spend hours crafting a presentation that would be impossible to ignore or dismiss. 15 slides that told the story from paradise to prison. But even as I worked, I wondered, would anyone believe me? Or were they all complicit, all benefiting from Barbara's schemes? The thought that gnawed at me most was whether the other HOA board members knew. Were they getting kickbacks? Were they afraid? Or were they truly oblivious to what their president was doing? I was about to find out. The October HOA meeting was in 3 days. I registered to speak about neighborhood security concerns, which Barbara approved with a smirk, probably thinking I was going to complain about break-ins and give her more ammunition against me. Arthur promised to attend and sit in the back corner with his phone ready to record everything. This needs to be documented, he said. When Barbara goes down, she'll try to take everyone with her. We need proof of what really happened. As I submitted my speaker registration, I couldn't help but smile. Barbara thought she was playing chess while everyone else played checkers. She was about to learn that sometimes the best move is to flip the entire board. I had all the evidence, but would anyone at the HOA meeting even believe me? Or were they all in on it? What would you do with this evidence? Call the cops or publicly destroy her? Comment below while I show you what I chose. Barbara thought HOA fines would break me. Instead, I booked a front row seat to her downfall. The 3 days leading up to the HOA meeting were the longest of my life. I refined my presentation obsessively, making sure every slide was perfect, every piece of evidence crystal clear. I practiced my delivery in front of the mirror, timing myself, making sure I could get through everything in my allotted 15 minutes. But even as I prepared, Barbara was working her own angles. The morning of the meeting, I woke up to find my mailbox stuffed with printed screenshots from the community social media page. Emergency HOA vote tonight. Barbara had posted regarding property violations at 1847 Oak Creek Drive. She wasn't content to wait for my presentation. She was going on the offensive first. I called Arthur, who laughed darkly. She's going to try to get you fined into submission before you can speak. Classic Barbara move. But don't worry, I've got something planned too. He wouldn't elaborate, just told me to trust him and stick to the plan. By 7 p.m., I was sitting in my car outside the community center, watching neighbors file in. The parking lot was fuller than usual. Barbara had clearly rallied her troops. I saw faces I recognized from their angry comments online, all shooting me dirty looks as they passed. Chad was there too, slouching and wearing a tank top that said support local businesses, which felt like a deliberate taunt. Barbara herself was in full presidential mode, power suit, clipboard, and a smile that didn't reach her eyes. She was greeting everyone at the door like a politician, shaking hands and whispering in ears. I waited until 7:25 before entering, not wanting to give Barbara time to work on me before the meeting. The community center was packed with over 50 residents crammed into a space meant for 30. Extra chairs had been brought in, and people were standing along the walls. I found a seat near the front where my laptop would be visible when connected to the projector. Arthur caught my eye from the back corner and gave me a subtle thumbs up. His phone was already out, positioned to capture the entire room. Good. Whatever happened tonight, there would be a record. Barbara called the meeting to order at exactly 7:30, banging her gavel with obvious satisfaction. Before we get to our scheduled speaker, she announced, her voice dripping with false concern, we have an urgent matter to address. It has come to my attention that the new resident at 1847 Oak Creek Drive has installed numerous unauthorized security devices that are creating a hostile environment for our community. She clicked a remote, and photos of my house appeared on the screen behind her. My cameras, my smart lock, even my perfectly legal security system signs, all presented like evidence in a criminal trial. These devices violate multiple HOA regulations, Barbara continued, reading from her clipboard with theatrical seriousness. Section 7.3.2 regarding aesthetic uniformity, Section 4.1.7 regarding electronic devices visible from the street, and most concerningly, Section 9.2 regarding surveillance equipment that may capture images of neighbors or their children. That last bit got the crowd murmuring angrily. Barbara was good, I had to admit. She was playing on every suburban parent's fear of being watched, completely ignoring that my cameras only covered my own property. Therefore, Barbara announced, raising her voice over the crowd, I motioned to impose an immediate $5,000 fine for multiple violations, with additional $500 daily fines until all unauthorized equipment is removed. All in favor. The response was immediate and overwhelming. 47 hands shot up like they'd been spring-loaded. Only 3 people abstained, including Arthur. Barbara's smile was triumphant as she banged her gavel. Motion carries. Mr. Thompson, you have been formally fined $5,000 by community vote. Now, I believe you registered to speak about security concerns. I stood up slowly, making sure my laptop was connected to the projector. The room was hostile, faces twisted with the smug satisfaction of putting the outsider in his place. I smiled. Thank you for that, President Whitman. And yes, I would like to address security concerns. Specifically, the security of my private property. I clicked to my first slide, a beautiful photo of my pool at sunset. This is what I purchased. Private property, a place to find peace after years of hard work. But let me show you what I actually got. The crowd shifted restlessly as I clicked to the next slide. It showed the detritus I'd found that first morning, beer cans, cigarette butts, and worse. Someone has been using my pool without permission. But that's not the worst part. Click. The next slide showed footage from my security cameras, teenagers drinking, couples in compromising positions, someone vomiting in my pool. The room erupted. Oh my God, that's Jessica, screamed a woman in the third row. Another parent stood up, face purple with rage. That's my son. He's only 16. Chad's head snapped up from his phone, his cocky expression melting into panic. But I was just getting started. The next slide showed Chad at the gate, collecting cash from each arriving teenager, the counting of money at the end of the night, Barbara receiving her envelope. The room had gone from hostile to shocked, voices rising in confusion and anger. What the hell is this? Someone shouted. Is that our HOA president? Barbara tried to regain control. These are clearly edited deepfakes. But her voice was drowned out by the crowd as I clicked to the next slide. The Paradise Pool exclusive social media page, I said calmly. 5,247 followers. 847 posts over 3 years. Every single one taken at my pool. Every single one tagged with my address. The room exploded. Parents were pulling out their phones, finding the page, recognizing their children in photos they'd never seen before. They've been selling access to his pool. Someone yelled. For how long? I clicked again. The Excel spreadsheet appeared, showing my conservative calculations based on documented prices and attendance. I estimate $200,000 in annual revenue. $600,000 over 3 years. All unreported. All untaxed. The crowd was in full uproar now, but Barbara was still trying to maintain control. These are baseless accusations. I demand you stop this presentation immediately. But I wasn't done. Not even close. Let me show you something from last week, I said, clicking to the video. Barbara's voice filled the room from the speakers. This month, I'm taking 80%. You need to learn better management skills. The room went dead silent except for Barbara's recorded voice. I handle the cops, the neighbors, the HOA. That's worth 80%. You could have heard a pin drop. Where's our HOA money, Barbara? Someone shouted from the back. It was like a dam breaking. Suddenly, everyone was yelling at once. You've been lying to us. My daughter could have died at one of those parties. This is fraud. Barbara was banging her gavel frantically, screaming for order, but no one was listening. Chad had stood up and was edging toward the door, but angry parents blocked his path. You sold my kid alcohol? One father snarled. $60 for a $20 bottle? I raised my voice over the chaos. But wait, there's more. The room quieted just enough for me to continue. BNC Entertainment LLC, Barbara and Chad's company. Registered as event planning. Never filed taxes. Never got permits. Never carried insurance. I clicked to the business registration documents. $600,000 in revenue. $0 reported to the IRS. The implications hit the room like a sledgehammer. Tax evasion, fraud, serving alcohol to minors, child endangerment. This wasn't just HOA drama anymore. This was criminal. That's when parent number 5 stood up, shaking. What she said next made Barbara's face turn white. My daughter is in the ICU from your party 3 weeks ago. My daughter Emma went to a pool party. She came home unconscious. Blood alcohol poisoning. The hospital said she nearly died. She's still in intensive care. The woman was crying now, holding up a hospital bill. $47,000 in medical bills because of your illegal parties. The room erupted into complete chaos. More parents stood up with their own stories. My son is in rehab. You told us Caleb was the problem. You've been using US to protect your crime ring. Barbara's carefully constructed world was crumbling in real time. She tried one last desperate attempt at damage control. These are all lies. Manufactured evidence. I was trying to provide safe, supervised activities for our youth. The money was for maintenance and improvements. Check the HOA accounts. Show us where the money went, someone screamed. Barbara's face went from red to white. She looked around the room like a trapped animal, finding no allies, no support. Even her usual flying monkeys were staring at her in horror. Chad chose that moment to break for the door, but Arthur stepped out from his corner, still recording. Going somewhere, Chad? I think these parents would like a word with you. Chad spun around, trapped between Arthur and a crowd of furious parents. I clicked to my second to last slide. I sent all of this evidence to the appropriate authorities 3 hours ago. The IRS has copies of everything. The state tax board is investigating. The business licensing department has been notified. And yes, the police are fully aware of the underage drinking and child endangerment. Barbara's legs seemed to give out. She sank into her chair, gavel falling from her hand. But I had one more slide. The real question is this. She didn't just steal from me. She endangered your children. She used her HOA positions to protect her crimes. She turned you into accomplices. So, what are you going to do about it? The room was in complete upheaval. Someone had already called the police. Parents were demanding immediate access to HOA financial records. Board members were distancing themselves from Barbara, claiming they knew nothing. Chad was surrounded by angry parents demanding answers about what he'd sold their kids. And through it all, Barbara sat frozen at the president's table, watching her empire collapse. Arthur was still filming, making sure to capture every moment. The meeting that was supposed to crush me had become Barbara's public execution. Then the door opened. 2 IRS agents in dark suits entered, followed by local police. The room went silent again. Barbara Whitman? One of the agents asked. Barbara's head snapped up, her face a mask of terror. We need to speak with you regarding BNC Entertainment LLC and approximately $600,000 in unreported income. Barbara tried to run. It was a pathetic attempt. She stumbled over someone's purse, went sprawling, and landed face first on the community center's worn carpet. The crowd gasped as she struggled to get up, her perfect suit rumpled, her makeup smeared. I want my lawyer, she screamed as the officers helped her to her feet. This is entrapment. This is harassment. I'll sue every one of you. But her threats fell on deaf ears. The room watched in stunned silence as the HOA president who'd ruled their neighborhood with an iron fist was led away in handcuffs. Chad wasn't far behind. Mom, he cried out. Mom, say something. Help me. But Barbara wouldn't even look at him. She kept her head down, defeated as they led her out. Chad's abandonment was complete. The woman who had enabled and profited from his schemes couldn't save him now. The room erupted in applause. Someone started slow clapping, and soon the entire community center was giving me a standing ovation. People who had glared at me an hour ago were shaking my hand, thanking me for exposing the truth. Parents hugged each other, grateful their children were safe. Board members scrambled to distance themselves from Barbara's schemes. And through it all, Arthur kept filming, documenting the complete transformation of a community. I clicked to the video. Barbara's voice boomed. I handle the cops and HOA. That's worth 80% of the profits. The room froze. Then a scream. And my daughter's in the ICU because of your party. Chaos erupted. Barbara's gavel clattered to the floor just as IRS agents walked in. The meeting continued for another 2 hours as residents demanded answers, formed committees to investigate the HOA finances, and called for immediate elections. Barbara was in jail, but Chad, he was still out there. And he just posted something that made my blood run cold. Guess what Chad tried to do next? Wrong answers only in the comments. The aftermath was swift and merciless. Within 24 hours, the local news had picked up the story. HOA president ran teen drinking ring, made for sensational headlines, and Barbara's mugshot became the most shared image in the state. Channel 7 ran a special investigation, interviewing parents and showing my security footage with faces blurred. The Paradise Pool's social media page gained 10,000 followers overnight before being shut down as evidence. Chad's personal accounts were flooded with angry comments from parents whose kids had been endangered. What made my blood run cold was Chad's final post before his arrest. They're lying. I'll be back. That pool is mine. The delusion was complete. Even facing criminal charges, he still believed he had some claim to my property. 1 week later, the full scope of Barbara's crimes became clear. Forensic accountants discovered she'd embezzled over $50,000 from HOA funds, using it to maintain her lifestyle while her illegal pool business provided the rest. 8 families filed civil suits. The girl in the ICU thankfully recovered, but her family's lawyer was seeking $2 million in damages. Barbara was denied bail after prosecutors argued she was a flight risk with hidden assets. Chad got luckier, released on recognizance, but ordered to stay 500 feet from my property and perform 300 hours of community service. The judge specifically ordered him to work at a youth substance abuse center, forcing him to see the consequences of selling alcohol to minors. His tears during sentencing were the first genuine emotion I'd seen from him. 1 month later, Barbara's house sprouted a foreclosure sign. The neighborhood gossiped that she'd mortgaged it 3 times to cover legal fees. Chad was spotted working at McDonald's, part of his court-ordered employment requirement. The HOA held emergency elections, and a retired accountant named Jim became the new president. His first act was ordering a full financial audit. His second was issuing me a formal apology and a $10,000 settlement for damages caused by the previous administration. With that money, I upgraded my security system to include AI facial recognition, 8 cameras with night vision, motion sensors that could detect a mosquito, and an automated alert system that would make Fort Knox jealous. But the crown jewel was the sign I installed next to my pool. 6 feet tall, professionally made, impossible to miss. Private property. AI facial recognition active. Chad Whitman detected equals automatic police response. Yes, Chad, this means you. 2 weeks after installation, the system got its first test. Chad appeared at exactly 51 feet from my property line. The system remained silent. He took 1 step closer, crossing into the 50-foot range. Instantly, alarms blared, floodlights blazed, and an automated voice boomed. Intruder detected. Chad Whitman identified. Calling police. And he ran so fast he left his shoes behind. Arthur got it all on video and made it his ring own. These days, I finally have the peace I paid for. Every morning I swim my laps in perfect solitude. Every evening I sit by my pool with a book and a whiskey, enjoying the sound of absolutely nothing. Barbara's serving 5 to 7 years behind bars. Chad's flipping burgers. And me? They made me HOA president. Every time I unlock my pool with that eyesore smart lock, I remember. Sometimes the smallest weapon can take down the biggest tyrant. Last week, I got an email that made me laugh out loud. Congratulations. You've been elected HOA president with 98% of the vote. I stared at it in disbelief. After everything I'd been through to escape HOA drama, they wanted me to run the show. Arthur's text arrived moments later. With your security system, we'll have the safest neighborhood in America. Congratulations, Mr. President. You know what? Maybe being HOA president wouldn't be so bad. At least I knew I'd never abuse the position. So that's how a $200 smart lock exposed a $600,000 crime ring, sent an HOA president to prison, and accidentally made me the most reluctant HOA president in history. The lock that Barbara called an eyesore ended up being the key to justice. She wanted it gone within 48 hours. Instead, she's behind much uglier locks for the next 5 to 7 years. As for Chad, he actually tried to break in again last week. The footage is absolutely insane. Should I make a part 2? Let me know in the comments, and remember, if your HOA president seems weirdly interested in your pool, maybe install a smart lock. You never know what secrets might surface. What did we learn today? Probably nothing, but it was fun, wasn't it? Show some love with a like, and don't forget to subscribe to HOA Unfiltered.